We have a market space that we want to address. We have some pretty strong feelings about how we want to address that market space. We call that a business strategy.
Your developer should know what they're building and not just build it without any input or whatever.
It appears as though a leadership team has had a sudden shift in priorities and they're dictating a massive swing in what we're going to do.
Hey, welcome to Dev Better. Today, we are going to talk about product, something that is near and dear to my heart. And with me, I have Jason Brett of Product Coffee. Say hi, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Nice. Tell us a little bit, to kick everything off, tell us a little bit about what Product Coffee does, and then we'll dig into the meat of this episode, which I'm actually quite excited about.
All right, so real quickly, Product Coffee is a global community of product managers. We exist for the purpose of helping each other be better at this career that is constantly evolving and changing, especially today. There are a lot of certification classes out there and a lot of ways to learn product management, but the reality is you learn it by doing it and getting into the practical experience. It always helps to have a community of people who have been there and done it before. So that's what we're building. We build relationships so that you can have people to lean on. We do provide a lot of training and courses as well to help people level up their skills or revisit some of the skills they've learned along the way.
Awesome, and I have to say, y'all have caused some trouble. You being product people have caused some trouble for me over the years. So, no, just kidding. It is certainly an awesome endeavor to talk about how you make product better, because product is one of those organizations that a lot of people see as kind of a black box. They don't really know what it does unless you've been a product manager. Then you're like, oh, I know exactly what it is.
But I still can't explain it to my parents.
Yeah, I know, right? And as an engineer, I've been the recipient of products whims, and good product, and we won't talk about bad product, but good product always is a huge force multiplier for getting things out the door. And today we're going to talk about that. So first I want to discuss just briefly for those of you at home that maybe don't know how products are built, what an engineering pipeline looks like. And if you will, imagine we have a pipe that moves from the left side to the right side. On that left side at the very beginning, we have our stakeholders. And these are the people in the organization that have a particular business problem that they're trying to solve. And those folks will then feed that information into a team called a product team. And again, this is very, very high level. If your organization is different, then flame me in the comments. It doesn't matter. But this is generally how things are set up, right? So product then ideates on and tests hypotheses and tests business ideas. And Jason, you can jump in more and talk more in depth about that as we move forward, about how we're going to solve that problem, or not really how, but what are we doing to solve the problem, the why of the problem, and then that gets passed into maybe a UX team. Maybe you have some UXers that will do wireframes and fun things, and then that is handed off to folks like myself, developers, who will then look at your specifications and say, this is terrible, Jason. What are you trying to make me build? This doesn't make any sense. But I kid. The conversation we want to have today is about all of the touch points throughout that pipeline and the communication that has to happen to move idea from an idea into software as we move from left to right. I'm the guy to talk about the dev stuff. When we get to the product things, I have no clue, right? So, Jason, why don't we start it off? Let's kick it off. As far as alignment from your stakeholders to your CEO to whatever, who are the actors that care about this idea, and how does product fit into their vision, the CIO, CEO, whoever, their vision of how their business is going to succeed?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Because I think there's a lot of general misunderstanding on that specific topic.
Right.
The reality is at the top level of the organization, you have business leadership, CEO, CIO, CMO, CRO. And let's just start with the CEO, CRO, and the CMO. We have a market space that we want to address. We have some pretty strong feelings about how we want to address that market space. We call that a business strategy, super simplified. Then we have a desire to develop products in order to achieve that business strategy. And we call that a product strategy. And it's where those two things come together that it gets really interesting. Making sure that we are creating the right lines of communication and understanding so that we are designing and building products that can directly map to solving for and delivering on our business strategy is the fundamental role of the product development organization as a whole. And product development is those parts that you talked about. It's product management, it's UX, it is development as well.
Yep.
Then you have a lot of other stakeholders around the company. You have customer support, customer service, customer experience, depending on how your organization is set up. You have IT, just your general CIO organization. They all have a stake. They all have a perspective. You have legal, you have finance. They all have a stake and a perspective that goes into how we can solve these problems from a product perspective and through other business aspects. And so creating a large understanding of all of those different players and distilling it down into communicable conversations that can flow all the way into the development team is the fundamental role of product management.
Sounds like you guys have a lot going on.
A little bit.
We like to talk about development being sometimes seen as the redheaded stepchild of the organization, where we get all of the problems of the organization. But I want to point out that actually product gets them first. We get them second after they've come through y'all's filter, and you've spent the time, in good cases, of building the way that we're going to solve, or helping us understand the problem that we're going to solve, and then we figure out how to solve it. So Jason, from hearing you talk, my understanding is that product is more or less a focusing lens. That's how you talk about it. So talk to us a little bit about what that means and how that aligns product to be a huge value add to the rest of the organization.
Sure. So when we talk about all those different voices that come into play into what we should do, why we should do it, when we should do it, I do like the word focusing lens, or the term focusing lens, because it really best reflects how the role of product is to take all of this information in, bring it together, and make meaning out of it, and frankly, create some priorities from all of the different voices. So there are a few things that product has to do in order to do that. One is you have to have a really disciplined view of where we need to go and why. And creating an awareness around the organization, and especially on the development team, of what that direction is, why it exists, not just that it exists. And that's a fundamental difference. And this is where you see a big distinction between good product management and bad product management, or good leadership and bad leadership in general. There is, here's what I want you to do. But then there's the bigger conversation of, here's what we need to achieve. Here's a way I think we can do it.
Right.
Those are fundamentally different conversations. But creating that awareness of the why we are doing what we're doing is really important. And alignment is the third one. And that is, not only have you created awareness at the development level and at the UX level and or other parts of the organization that you touch, the other part of the product management role is to create alignment, or to ensure and foster alignment all the way from top to bottom, because we've had that business direction come down. Here's what we need to do as a business. Okay, here's how we can create products. Here are the products that we can deliver in order to achieve those business outcomes that we're after. And then there is, getting back to your problem solution that I want to revisit in just a minute, but you get down to the engineering level, and now we have the how we're going to do this. Well, that needs to flow back up. And product management's role is to ensure that clean flow from top to bottom, back and forth, and out, and even out into the marketplace and to the customer as well, ultimately.
Right. And I've seen a lot of anti-patterns in those conversations that we'll talk about. The primary being the conversations that should go from the engineering team back into product. A lot of the times we sort of just assume that what product gives us is exactly what needs to happen, but we have this entire team of thinking individuals that are very technical, but also business savvy to a degree, at least in a good product organization. Your developer should know what they're building and not just build it without any input or whatever. But we want to talk about that in a minute. But you said top to bottom, you said something that's very interesting to me, and it's all about alignment from a communications perspective, from the C-suite, the stakeholders, all the way straight down into the product organizations. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of time for the game of telephone, right? There's a lot of time and entropy for that message to go from top to bottom, where it will just kind of degrade into nothing. Talk about some of the challenges that you've seen there, and any frameworks you might have at a high level that you can ensure that message doesn't degrade as it hits your factory workers, you're down and on the line type people.
So we joke about lots of times. We joke about the meeting to prepare for the meeting at the business level of an organization. We're going to have a meeting. Well, now we're going to have a meeting to prepare for the meeting, and it seems like a big waste of time. And it can be, but done well, it's not at all. And I think that's a huge part of the solution is communicating intentionally and effectively throughout the organization, previewing with the leadership team what's going to be shared with the development team, previewing what's going to be shared with the leadership team, with the development team. So if the product manager's role is to ensure that awareness and alignment, then it's very important that the product manager is taking the time to ensure that they're communicating it accurately from the original sources. So as we synthesize this information and bring it into the requirements document is the simplest way to look at it. Making sure that we're taking the responsibility to review and confirm that we're communicating accurately is a huge part of the antidote to that problem.
For sure. And, again, having received lots of the output of the product organization, I've always found that is one of the key pieces, is to be in alignment with what we're doing, but also to trust, right? That what I'm getting is in fact trustworthy is the only thing I knew to say, because there's plenty of times where, again, if you're viewing this as just a factory robot type pipeline from left to right and not something that has human beings at every point, then, from a systems perspective, it's very simple. You pass the ticket from left to right and it gets worked on and you produce the widget, and at the end you produce a result. But again, we're dealing with human beings who tend to have entropy in communications. They tend to forget things. They tend to lose context. They tend to, again, have this thing called emotions, which all of us struggle with every day, where it's, I don't like that person. They were mean to me on Saturday, and therefore I'm not going to think what they're asking me to do has any credibility whatsoever. So you have this whole hierarchy, again, of a human-based system that, again, I think the process nerds get all caught up in that as being, well, if you just did the process right. I got in a fight on LinkedIn recently about this, and I'm kind of scarred. But honestly, it's not just about the process; it's about the people that are involved in the process, and you have to craft the process to adjust for the human element, right? And you talk about trust a lot, and trust is something as a consulting firm is near and dear to my heart, because if my clients don't trust me, they're not going to hire me.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that. How does trust play into this entire hierarchy that we're trying to solve for?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions that there is. And I think there is often an immature understanding of trust in organizations and just among people in general. And you have to really give it some serious thought to understand what that means. And you're talking about, at the development team level, when I'm handed a requirement that is very prescriptive and tells me exactly what to build, what to write, and how to do it, then my immediate question is, well, doesn't the product manager trust me to actually do my job?
Right.
At the same time, as a product manager, when I'm delivering a roadmap to my leadership team and they're questioning the heck out of me and saying things like "stay in your lane" when I'm trying to drive business direction with products, well, that's my immediate response is, well, why don't you trust me? You hired me for this job.
Right.
And do I trust the process? And I read a book a while back that was recommended to me by an old CTO of mine. I'm going to call him out, Jeff Browning. When I was at Silver Pop, he kind of guided us through the acquisition by IBM. It was a great experience. And Jeff's a great guy, and he recommended a book to me called Fruit at Work by Chris Evans. And in this book, Chris talks about 5 kinds of trust that I think are really useful for understanding this idea. And they are trust in competence, in character, in vision, in motivation, and in appreciation. When you're talking about character, you're trusting that people are making decisions from a good moral and ethical foundation. When you're talking about competence, you're trusting that they have the skill and the knowledge and the understanding to do what they're assigned to do what they need to do.
Yep.
When you're talking about vision, you're trusting that they have accurately identified an opportunity or a problem and have a good idea of how to solve it in general.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about motivation, you're trusting that they're doing it for the right reasons. They don't have some ulterior motive. You're also trusting that they don't have an ulterior motive that they're unaware of. Do they have a bias that they're not even aware of?
Right.
And finally, with appreciation, are they giving credit and respect to the right people and ideas and thoughts along the way? So if you take that 5-point model and apply it all the way from the top to the bottom, bottom to the top, and even to the process, you can start to ask yourself, do I trust that this process was created in a way that is really designed to ensure success for everybody in it?
Right. And I would suspect that each person is going to weight those elements differently. So as an engineer, competence is one thing that resonates with me. Like if I'm talking to someone and I trust that they know what they're doing, then I maybe don't care as much about some of those other things like vision. Like I'm not necessarily keyed into, can I trust this person's vision versus character, competence, and appreciation are three things that I would say are more interesting to me, because as a developer, I need to work with people that I like, that I trust are out to help me and to help the organization get better. I need to work with people that are motivated to do it for good reasons, and they're not sort of trying to undercut me politically and get me fired for some reason. Appreciation is great because you never like that person that just says, you're doing such a good job. I want my TPS reports by 5:30. Like you don't. That'd be great. Yeah, that would be great. You don't. I don't like working with people that are disingenuous with those types of compliments. Like appreciation is an important thing in any organization, and if it's disingenuous, it does more harm than help, in my opinion. But each of those points, and I love that you said this because I had not heard this, and I'm going to buy that book, by the way. It resonates very well, and it's a natural thought process to, do I trust that the process and these people are in alignment with the following ideas that are trying to move the organization forward?
And if the organization, and this is an organizational health issue,
right,
is establishing the correct communications and conversations to ensure that you're developing that trust. And one of the things that some of the best leaders do is they take ownership of the need to do that, and they find ways to insert themselves in conversations so that they can help to foster all those different kinds of trust, top to the bottom and through process, so that everyone can be more effective and realize how they're contributing value.
Right. What are some things that you've seen that undermine that trust? What are some anti-patterns?
I had a really good conversation years and years ago with a friend of mine who made a lasting impression on me. At the time, I'm known for being a little bit over the top in how I communicate things. I like to have fun with conversations, and I tend to be very confident when I speak. I told my friend I have this problem that people think that I'm very arrogant, and I'm not really all that arrogant. And he said, well, actually, Jason, you are arrogant. Did a double take, and he explained to me, he said, you're arrogant because you have a lot of assumptions that you don't validate properly. And you also are arrogant because you assume that everyone around you has been through the same exploratory process that you have. So you dictate a concept and just assume that everybody already understands how you got there and is just going to come along for the ride. And while I didn't really think of that as arrogance, as I look back, and it may or may not actually be arrogance, I don't know if he was right. I'm just kidding. But it was certainly a lasting impression because it helped me understand that anti-pattern that you're talking about. And so often, individual contributors, leaders, everyone in the organization forgets that they have a perspective that they arrived at through a lot of experience, a lot of education, a lot of work. And the people around them don't have the benefit of their identical experience. That's why we talk about diversity of experience being really valuable. But it creates the problem when we forget and don't allow for the fact that we know something that others don't for very good reasons. One of the biggest challenges that you will hear, one of the biggest examples that you'll see on an ongoing basis is when it appears as though a leadership team has had a sudden shift in priorities, and they're dictating a massive swing in what we're going to do. And we hear things like, well, they're just up there in the ivory tower. They don't know what's going on in the real world. And the reality is, you're right and wrong, is they're sitting where they're sitting for a very good reason with a lot of inputs that maybe you're not exposed to, and they're making decisions based on things that we're not aware of, and they haven't necessarily communicated the why. They've only communicated the what.
Right.
And it happens the opposite direction as well.
Yes.
I know about a new technology that everybody ought to be using. That's going to cause a massive refactor to be able to deploy this technology, but it's going to save us a lot of money. So why is engineering slowing down so much on this deliverable? Why are they refactoring this thing again? Well, because they know a thing that's going to save us money and make us more effective in the long term, but they haven't communicated that effectively back up through the chain. It happens in both directions. So forgetting that people don't have the benefit of your experience and failing to allow for that and communicate a more full picture as you're fostering those communications is the number one anti-pattern.
I think that is exactly correct. And I had the same thing said to me, by the way, is early on people viewed me as arrogant. And in my head, I'm like, well, I'm no way, right? I'm that guy that doesn't think I know anything, right? I'm that guy that struggles with imposter syndrome. There's a lot of things that on the day-to-day tell me, well, there's no way that I could be arrogant. But then you just sort of put it in such good terms as technically, I don't know that that's arrogance. I would categorize it as overconfidence, which is a different, I mean, again, we can argue over that. But ultimately, I think you stated it so well that we can't, it's situational awareness. We have to look at where we're at and understand that our perspective is not the same as everybody else's perspective and over communicate to ensure that we're all in alignment. I built a remote company, and if you've ever tried to do that, it's very, very difficult because you're not sitting across the room from someone, right? You and I aren't in the same room doing work. You're in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and the only way I can figure out what you're thinking is to talk to you all the time. So one of the advantages I've seen from a remote company is that we can have those conversations, and we're programmed to over-communicate to one another because there is no social cues. There's no body language apart from cameras, but you only get so much from that. So it's interesting to me that every problem that we see always boils down to an organizational issue with a group composed of human beings. Even if you think about engineering challenges and product challenges and CEO challenges and ivory towers and architects, it's all about we need to just start talking to one another more and stop assuming that everybody knows what I'm talking about and stop, get out of the way of your own self. Stop dealing with, you think you're smarter than everybody else. Just be humble and have conversations and your organization will immediately get better. I know I just reduced like an entire field of organizational effectiveness to like 2 sentences. I promise it's not that easy. But in general, when you think about it, that is the high level issue, right?
And it's a never ending practice because as you do this, as you communicate more effectively and more completely and help people understand not just the what, but also, and not just the what, not just the how, but also the why.
Yeah.
You develop these levels of trust, these factors of trust with every individual and even with every team. A product manager can develop supreme trust with an individual development team, but change out your architect and you start over.
Yeah, you do.
And let enough time pass, by the way, and that trust starts to fade as well.
100%.
It's a constant work in progress.
Especially in a consulting firm, anytime there's a personnel change on a client, everybody gets really nervous. Because it's like, oh, we did all this great work, but this person may not care, or they may have a different firm that they want to use, or they may, not be the same type of human that we're used to working with. So again, clients, if you're out there, please give us advance notice. Let us meet these people. But at the end of the day, I think it's good to see that not good, but it's interesting to see that all of the challenges that product runs into are the same challenges that we run into in engineering crews. And it really is about building that pipeline. So just to recap, so you start with, stakeholders passing information to product then turns that into specifications that are passed to development. Again, that's a very reductionist view. It's a lot more complex than that. But the human element of each of those touch points is what I've found to be the root cause of most of your issues. Is it's about ensuring that you have good relationships top to bottom, ensuring that people are humble and having these conversations in the right way, and also leaning into one another, right? Product leaning into engineering for more detailed understanding of the how, and then engineering leading into product and saying, I trust that these people are doing the right thing and that that their business cases are solid and that they're trying to do something that makes the company, change the world or whatever is up on the, the boardroom. Yep. Wall. So that's awesome. So Jason, thanks for your time, man. I think tell us where to find y'all, because one, your organization's awesome. We support you. And clients, if you're listening, please go check these folks out. Good product makes my life a lot easier, which is why I wanted to have you on the show. So tell us where we can find y'all.
Productcoffee.com. It's easy. That's our website. You'll also find Product Coffee on LinkedIn and most of the other socials as well. We've got a YouTube channel at youtube.com/productcoffee where you can see us go live every week. We have a live virtual meetup every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday of the year. And you can catch those and just hear what we're talking about and join in our community there.
All right, check them out on productcoffee.com. Thanks, Jason, for joining us. Awesome content, and we'll see you on the next one.